In our younger days, April and I would often go dancing. Um, an activity that was supposed to be enjoyable oftentimes became very frustrating because she knew how to dance to hip hop and loved dancing to R&B, but I preferred smooth reggae and compa. Compa is a style of dancing native to Haiti that resembles salsa. Um, because of our frustrations, we stopped going on dance dates until recently. Uh, we decided that we would learn salsa together. Instantly, on the first day, we were reminded of those times that uh, we had bad experiences. But this time was different. This time, April and I had a coach. The coach taught April how to follow my lead and taught me how to move in a way that would send clear cues to April for April to respond. This was a perfect example of Peterson's tango in his book, Why Don't We Listen Better? In the concept of inhaling and exhaling mentioned by Stewart. Good morning. My name is Mike Sonatis, and today I'll be talking about interpersonal communication for my interpersonal communication project for Liberty University, class 508, Human Service Counseling. In order to do this, we'll be going over overarching goals. I'll be going over my behavioral blend from an assessment that I received. We'll be talking a little bit about my personal background, some communication barriers that I have, resources and strategies that would help me overcome those barriers, and also we'll discuss an action plan for the implementation of those barriers. And of course, I will conclude from there. My overarching goal is to create cohesion between myself and among other peoples from diverse backgrounds and various relationships with me through effective interpersonal communication. So, what does this mean? Uh, why is this important? For me, as a leader, it's important to use interpersonal communication to optimize the performance of an organization, team, or maybe as an individual motivator for one particular person. So, in doing so, I have to be mindful. I have to be empathetic uh, to the needs of the individuals who make up those teams within that organization. So, in order to do that, I have to understand the definition of or the meaning or the importance of interpersonal communication. I must also refrain from using impersonal communication, although I do have a tendency to get results from impersonal communication. But when it comes to building a team and an organization, it's very important for me to learn how to be very personable with those individuals. So Stewart asserts that communicators are always both talking and listening, constantly sending and receiving signals, giving us cues and taking them. He calls this process inhaling and exhaling. But to be an effective communicator, it's important to understand the differences between impersonal communication and interpersonal communication. Impersonal communication is a label used to describe typical interactions, such as interactions at a bank with a bank teller, at a drive through with a salesperson, or just a basic transaction. Whereas interpersonal communication is a title that defines or a label that defines the kind of communications that happens between people um, that have a much deeper relationship. It involves talking and listening in ways that maximizes the presence of an individual. So it requires some trust in that individual. It requires a listening ear. It requires a lot more work when it comes to that kind of communication, because you want to build trust and confidence in that relationship. So now that we've talked about the my overarching goals, let's discuss some of my behavioral blends. For instance, my behavioral blend is a DC and also a SD behavioral blend. So for the behavioral blend, I tend to be very, very dominant in a sense. So I'm very task oriented. That's one of my strengths. I prefer to be in control. And the way I establish control is by being very knowledgeable or showing that I have a full understanding of the situation at hand, which requires me to be very analytical. And therefore, I have decent or very good. I shouldn't even say decent. I should say I have very good technical skills, and I'm very direct in my communication. I will also say that I like to be dependable. So I am dependable. I come across that way, and I basically accept that people can rely on me no matter what the cost is to me personally. However, with that said, I also lack personal skills because oftentimes I'm very impersonal. I ask you what you need, I give you what you need. And that is basically the way I prefer to communicate because emotions are not that important to me. But this also comes across as me being unenthusiastic. So, according to my chart, I have a great balance between both abilities, basically being direct and also being compassionate. The second part of my blend is the SD. I think over the years through mentorship and guidance and also maturity that I've come to value relationships more than I did in the past. So what that has done to me is that I believe that I am now a velvet and steel kind of individual, meaning I'm hard and soft at the same time. Uh, I'm also commanding and reliable. But one thing I had to work on was how to articulate more and how to show some enthusiasm and when I speak and when I respond to individuals. So now that we've talked about my behavioral blend, let's talk about my background. So I am American born, but I was born to Haitian parents. And back in 1990, they decided to move back to Haiti. And therefore, I grew up from ages 10 to 19. I grew up in Haiti. Following my years in Haiti after high school graduation, I joined the Marine Corps and have been part of the Marine Corps up until this point. Uh, in the process, I married a Southern American woman, which has made or added a lot to my personality and my views, specifically when it comes to living in America and in the lives of African Americans. So I've learned a lot from my wife April over the years. Um, I have a bachelor's from Columbia College. It's in general studies with a minor in human services, and I'm currently working on my master's in human services counseling and leadership with Liberty. Now, one thing that my personality has helped me with is in Haitian culture we tend to be very direct, very their empathy is implied. Um, it's a lot of tongue in cheek, but a lot of truth. However, in American culture, people tend to say, as pointed out by Stewart, that people tend to say things that they don't quite mean and expect a response that they think the person understands what they're saying. When what happens is that the person does not understand what they're saying, and therefore they do not get the response that they expected. So that creates a lot of confusion. Whereas in Haiti, people say what they mean and mean what they say, which often comes off as rude, impolite, and inconsiderate to many North American residents. So now that we've talked about my background, let's talk about some of those communication barriers. I mentioned some of them being my brashness and me being direct. One thing I can say that my authoritative communication can come across as condescending to some, especially for those that are not in the military. But in the Marine Corps, that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly normal. But as I transition out, it's something that I know will create barriers because even with some of my siblings, they look at me sideways when I approach civilians and I communicate with them in the manner that I typically would with a Marine. Although my intentions are good, the message just does not come across as such. Um, I have to. I know that unempathetic listening is also a problem because what I tend to do is I tend to do the ritual listening as you were listening, which is described as which Stewart describes as giving and receiving, or giving advice and also making it a point to get my point across when I feel as though I am not understood. So that leads to a lot of misunderstanding. And as somebody is speaking, I tend to be very analytical because, again, going back to the piece of being mindful, I tend to go back and forth to try to gather exactly what the person is trying to say because, as I stated, they oftentimes don't say what they mean. They always say what they feel, kind of, sort of, but not quite really. So, and also, one of my communication barriers is as I'm analyzing those individuals, I tend to be very eager to find a solution to the problem that they're presenting to me. So I don't remain in the present, which makes it difficult for me to see things from their perspective and truly understand the message or the meta message that they are sending. So one of the resources and strategies that I intend to use to help me with that would be using the talker listening card mentioned by Peterson, which is a great card. And also, that book is one of the best books and easiest books to read, yet most profound books, life changing books that I have read to date. Using mindfulness so that I'm not quick to speak, but remain open to listen, which the Bible also talks about this. So instead of being quick to speak and give the person my opinion and tell them how to do what they should be doing, I should simply listen, because sometimes individuals, as pointed out by in some of the readings, that sometimes the individual simply needs a listening ear. So we shouldn't remove their swimming pool from them as they're about to take a dive. So, which leads me to be more empathetic. And for me to be more empathetic, more enthusiastic, that means I have to be more genuine in my communication instead of being very technically savvy and being reserved, as pointed out in my blend, that instead of protecting and being guarded so that I can be perceived as strong-willed or confident, that I should give out a little bit more information about myself and be open when it comes to communicating with others, family members, and friends. All right, now that I've talked about those resources and strategies and action plan, resources and strategies, let's talk about my action plan. Pardon me. The thing is, for my action plan, I will do my best to listen to others empathetically, listen actively, refrain from providing advice, subdue the desires to fix issues, implement the Tango method provided by Pearson. And from there, I think that things for me will work out as far as communication. Now, a wise man once told me that no matter how much you know or how smart you are, if it isn't properly communicated, it's meaningless. So the Bible tells us, he who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him Therefore, it is important that I listen before I respond, that I listen, that I'm mindful in my listening, that I'm active in my listening, and sometimes not respond when required. Thank you.